Hello and welcome. You're watching News 18 Global and I'm Poonam Burde. The Russia-Ukraine war is facing a definitive moment as the counteroffensive rages on. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Ukrainian forces had lost no positions in their counteroffensive against Russian troops, while enemy forces had sustained only losses. Now, almost a fortnight ago, the Ukrainian army launched a long-awaited counteroffensive and since then has liberated at least 8 villages around 113 square kilometers of territory. Russia, too, has launched a full-scale invasion of the neighboring Ukraine. It started in February 2022 last year. 16 months on, we're seeing that onslaught continue. That war has been waging. The aggression is only increasing. But Ukraine is not going to give up.
In some sectors, our forces are moving forward. In others, they are defending positions or resisting assaults and intensified attacks from the occupiers. We have no lost positions, only liberated ones. They only have losses. Overall, the situation is one of pressure from us, which paves the way for our flag. Blue and yellow colors will be present throughout our south and east. There are no fortifications or reserves in the evil state that can stop Ukraine because we are on our land, and that gives us the greatest strength.
Now, Ukraine is in negotiations with Western allies as far as arms manufacturing is concerned to boost production of weapons, including drones, and talks are on to sign contracts in the coming months. Now, since Russia's invasion, Ukraine has been scrambling to secure weapons ranging from munitions to rocket launchers to missiles. Kiev is in talks with manufacturers from Germany, Italy, France and Eastern Europe for the production of weapons in Ukraine as it is expanding its drone programming for recon. Now remember, drones have been used extensively by both Moscow and Kiev's forces during the entire course of the last 15 months.
We have in Ukraine now around 100 producers of unmanned aerial drones. And this is quite a number at different stages of production. And most of them operate in stealth mode and provide these drones directly to the military to test with immediate feedback from combat. So that's why we think Ukraine now has the best, most innovative environment for developing military drones. And that's why we're here to actually show this opportunity to all the players in this space to come invest, produce their drones in Ukraine.
Now, NATO leaders have confirmed that they will not issue an official invitation to Ukraine to join the military alliance at its summit in July. NATO Secretary General came out and said that although consultations are on regarding Ukraine's bid to join the alliance, he is not in a position to preempt the outcome of these consultations. Stoltenberg also called for all parties to stop any further escalatory steps in the Kosovo conflict, further reiterating his intention to step down as the head of NATO when the term comes to an end.
At the Vilnius summit and in the preparations for the summit, we are not discussing to issue a formal invitation. What we are discussing is how to move Ukraine closer to NATO, and there are ongoing consultations, and I'm not in a position to preempt the outcome of those consultations. We agree on that NATO's door is open. We have demonstrated that with the invitation of Finland and Sweden. We also agree on what we stated in 2008, that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance. We also agree that it's not for Russia, but for Ukraine and NATO allies to decide when the time is right to invite Ukraine. Russia doesn't have a veto over NATO decisions.
We should be prepared that the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine could still last a long time. We are preparing for that and adjusting our policies based on that.
Meanwhile, the collapse of the Kakhovka dam in southern Ukraine has unleashed an ecological crisis. It has led to massive destruction in the Kherson region. It has contaminated drinking water supplies for thousands of people. Hundreds of dead fish were found after floodwaters receded in the nearby areas of Kherson. The collapse of the dam has also led to massive flooding, leading to the endangering of crops as well. Remember, thousands of people have already been evacuated from these areas, many of them now displaced indefinitely until they know when they can return to their homes. The crisis that not only faces Ukraine but the entire region as well, that is something that we will have to wait and watch out for as to what exactly transpires in that particular region and who is exactly responsible. We still haven't heard any responsibility being taken from either sides. Both sides keep pointing to the other as far as the explosion at that very crucial dam is concerned. Ruslan Botnik, Director of Ukrainian Institute of Politics, now joins us on this broadcast. Mr. Botnik, thank you so much for speaking with us here. And I'd like to begin by asking you, Ukraine has just is yet to come. How do you see that comment? What do you think the Defense Minister of Ukraine meant by that?
Hello, colleagues. Of course, Ukrainian counteroffensive operation is going on more to weeks, and we are close to the first defending line built by Russian forces last 9 months, and we have very heavy clashes, a lot of losses from the both sides. But for nowadays, we can say how it will be ended. Will it be a successful counteroffensive operation or not? I think the next 2 or 3 weeks will show us the main trend of this counteroffensive operation. At the same time, Russia is trying to make the counteroffensive operation in the Kharkiv Oblast and in Donetsk Oblast also. So it's a big, maybe semi-final game, semi-final stage of this war for this year, after which maybe peaceful negotiation will start.
Right, those negotiations will begin, but we've seen the kind of comments that have come to the fore from both sides. Both Russia and Ukraine have been making their own sorts of claims about gains on their side, about losses on the enemy's side. Do you think this is not just about reclaiming territory or keeping the fight on, but it's also about the war of optics and winning the war of narratives that we're seeing play out across the world?
We have exhausting war or attrition war. And in this situation, the territorial changes is not so important sometimes, like an informational influence for societies, for international community. So both sides are trying to convince the international community and their own society about their victory in this situation. Talking about the geographical or territorial changes, they are not so big. These changes for the last 2 weeks is not very important and influenceable for the future of this conflict. But if you are talking about the losses, soldiers' life, about the military equipment, of course, it's a huge battle. And in such type of battle, there is one main risk for understanding. Very long time, such battle can be staying on the same position. Heavy losses, heavy clashes, and no land changes. But then something can change very fast because of attrition exhausting the resources of the sites. Nowadays we can't estimate real resources of the sites, but I think it looks like both sides take a lot of losses nowadays.
And the losses continue. They've been mounting for the last 15 months. Mr. Botnik, this war really isn't going the way Vladimir Putin and Russia thought it would. They never thought this would drag on for 15 long months. And that is a cost that they perhaps didn't preempt as well. The cost of fighting a war is also immense. And the strain is being felt by Russia because sanctions have been coming in left, right and center.
Yes, you are right. And Russia takes a lot of different type of losses, economical, social, political losses in this situation. But the problem is that for Russia and for Ukraine and even for the West, this war has an existential reason. Because if somebody will lose, it means that all the political system of this side, Ukraine or the geopolitical influence of the United States or the future of Russia, will be changed very dramatically. So even taking a lot of losses, every side will be fighting till the end of their abilities to fight, unfortunately.
Right, one last question before I let you go, Mr. Botnik. There was much deliberation and a fervent appeal that came to the fore from the Ukrainian side, but NATO has declined a formal invitation to Ukraine to its summit that's going to be held next month. Do you think this is a big setback to Ukraine's fight back against Russia?
I don't think so. Of course, now we understand that Ukraine will not be accepted in NATO in the nearest summit in Vilnius in July this year. At the same time, NATO chiefs, NATO leadership said that Ukraine will be accepted to NATO after the ending of the war. And this is a good reason for one more reason for peaceful negotiation, because ending of the war means that Ukraine may become a member of NATO and obtain the real guarantee of security, and will become maybe become of European Union member. But during the war, Ukraine can't obtain any real security guarantees, because no one side, no one country is ready to fight together, shoulder by shoulder with Ukraine, and Ukraine can become a member of a formal member of Western social, economical, or military blocs.
Right, but even as the world is standing by Ukraine, we've seen the kind of military aid, financial aid that has come to the fore from most world powers as far as Ukraine's fight is concerned. It still doesn't seem to be enough. Now Ukraine is eyeing deals and contracts as far as manufacturing of weapons, especially drones, within Ukraine is concerned. But how do you think that is going to pan out, given that every single city is facing the wrath of Russian missiles or Russian drones?
You're right. I think it's very difficult to develop, to establish in Ukraine a big military industry, but very difficult because the electricity shortage, because of airstrikes from the Russian side. But Ukraine has a big amount of post-Soviet underground nuclear shelters. And we have a lot of storage places when even nuclear weapon was gathered during Soviet times. So the physical ability to make such type of enterprises, industries, of course there is, but shortage with electricity and another problem, also economical questions, also corruption questions, I think will be a big barrier to develop a huge industry, military industry in Ukraine. More successful, more perspective, I think, to make industry clusters abroad in our neighborhoods, countries like Poland and so on.
Right, so it's imperative for Ukraine that they do get their hands on these munitions, on these arms. How they do it, that's something that we'll have to keep an eye out on, because that's something that is going to fuel this counteroffensive that has just about begun. But Ruslan Botnik, thank you so much for speaking with us here on News 18 Global. My colleague Sanjay Suri also getting us the latest from on ground as far as the war in Ukraine is concerned. And Sanjay, you've traveled to the Kherson region. Now we've seen the after effect of the dam explosion. The region is still reeling under the after effects of that. There's blame that is being passed on between both sides as far as Russia and Ukraine is concerned. But there are many reports that are now doing the rounds that if you look at the kind of footage that's coming out, the satellite imagery, Russia seems to be the one behind this, because they had the means, the motive and the opportunity to do so.
Well, we are getting reports that the dam was blown up by an explosion, and there is no evidence of an external attack by way of any missile attack or air attack on the facility. And that would suggest that this was an internal job. Now, a lot of results are before us, lethal in different ways, environmental, as we've been talking about and as we've been hearing, but talking about the strategic impact, this has had a lot of consequence on Kherson region strategically. The Dnipro is a very wide river, and when late last year the Russians retreated from the western to the eastern bank of the river, it was to set that river up as a very, very firm line of defense against any Ukrainian attack. Now, what we've seen with the explosion of the dam is that it has caused immediate damage also on the Ukrainian side, of course, but in Kherson on the eastern bank as well. And that is where a lot of Russian positions were strengthened, in fact, over months. As a result, we have some reports now that the Russians have abandoned that area militarily. We're talking about the east of the Dnipro River. and they have redeployed a lot of these forces in Zaporizhia and to an extent also in Donetsk. And we are seeing also, as a result of this, partly a very strong resistance now developing to the Ukrainian counteroffensive. We've been hearing of gains and up to 8 kilometers deep in some areas, which is not insignificant. But a lot of these gains have been in areas that were deserted and largely undefended. The Melitopol target is a long way off. And given the resistance and given the delay, we are also hearing that there is a pause now taking place in the Kherson region and north of that in Zaporizhia in the Ukrainian counteroffensive, partly as a result of the damage done by the dam burst.
Right, so the blame still continues. No yet, but for the moment, Sanjay, thank you so much for getting us the latest. We are shifting focus now to the countdown that has almost ended to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States. He left for the United States this morning, and ahead of his departure, the Prime Minister shared details about his visit. He will first participate in the International Yoga Day celebrations at United Nations headquarters, where delegates from 195 countries will be doing yoga along with him. He will then fly down to Washington, D.C., where it will be down to business. He will be hosted by President Joe Biden and the First Lady at the White House, followed by participation in an event for skill development and capacity building. Prime Minister Modi will also be meeting with CEOs of American multinational companies, both in New York and in Washington, D.C. He will be then addressing the American Parliament and the diaspora events, all of which are going to happen in a jam-packed schedule that the Prime Minister has over the next 72 hours.
So it's a big week clearly for Indian diplomacy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is undertaking his first ever state visit to the United States in his 9 years as Prime Minister. Remember, he's been here 6 times in the last 9 years ever since he assumed Prime Ministership. But this is the first time that he will be the recipient of all the pomp and ceremony and the grandeur of a state visit. There's going to be the state banquet that's going to be hosted at the White House. That's going to happen on Thursday. But before that, first he comes here to New York City, to the Big Apple. He will be leading the Yoga Day celebrations at the UN headquarters, which is on the Upper East Side, the iconic UN headquarters building at 6 a.m. New York time. Prime Minister Modi, along with diplomats, including the UNGA President, the United Nations Security Council Secretary General, all of them will be part of the Yoga Day celebrations. That's going to happen on Wednesday, 6 a.m. local time here in New York City. Also, a whole bunch of substantive deals, particularly in defense technology, are going to be signed. The big one, of course, being the GE jet engine deal for the 414 GE jet engines, which are going to be manufactured in India. There's going to be a great degree of technology transfer as well as part of that deal. We're given to understand that by value, close to 80% of value of the jet engine will be transferred, and the technical know-how will be transferred to the Indian counterparts. Also, the other big deal in the defense realm, which is expected, happens to be the Predator armed drone deal. Now remember, the Predator drones are something that the US has very successfully deployed in the heartlands of Afghanistan against the Taliban, also operating on the terrorists who are operating from Pakistan. So it's been a very successful defense component of the US military relationship. They've been using this since the late 2000s, and for the very first time, they are extending this technology to India. We are given to understand that all 3 services, the Army, Navy and the Air Force, had expressed interest in buying some numbers of the Predator armed drones. We don't know the exact number or the value of this deal. That will likely be revealed through the course of this week. But I think it's going to be substantive that for the first time, an unmanned aerial vehicle deal of this nature is being signed between the United States and India. And of course, the commercial partnership will also be extended. There are a whole bunch of CEOs that the Prime Minister will be meeting, both here in New York as well as, of course, in Washington, D.C. He will also be taking part in a US IPF event as well. So it's going to be a packed itinerary for the Prime Minister over the next 3 days, both here in New York as well as in Washington, D.C.
I'm thrilled to welcome Prime Minister Modi for his historic visit to the United States. The U.S.-India relationship is extremely valuable and extremely important. Both of our countries share the common foundation of being vibrant democracies, firmly committed to upholding democratic values and principles. Our economic ties are built on substantial bilateral trade that contributes to job opportunities for all of our people. India is also a key partner in the Indo-Pacific, helping to ensure stability and security throughout the region. I look forward to hearing Prime Minister Modi address Congress and working to continually strengthen the relationship between our two countries.
And I want to take this opportunity to say how delighted I am that we are receiving an historic visit to the United States by the Indian Prime Minister, the Honorable Mr. Narendra Modi. What a momentous special occasion this is, and we welcome him to the United States. We eagerly look forward to him being hosted by the United States President Joe Biden at the White House on June 22nd, 2023.
India is not alone. The Security Council, what we have today, has been inherited from decades and decades ago, reflecting a different world with different big powers, different balance of power. Of course, India among those who believe they can contribute to the well-being of the world. The case of the reform has been going on in the negotiating process for 13 years, way too long. The first discussion that started on the potential necessity of reforming the Security Council started more than 40 years ago. So it's really high time.
Now, ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit, China has shot out what seems to be an unnerving message. It's clearly jittered by the bonhomie that we are seeing between the United States and India. The Chinese media, the state media, has now released a statement wherein they have declared that India's trade with the United States can neither replace its trade with China, nor can India replace China and the global supply chains. The more India exports to the United States, the more it needs to import from China, was the kind of message that Beijing wanted to send. China has further said that if the US and India want to further develop their economic and trade cooperation, they should solve their problems instead of bringing in China. Now, India has the right to choose its favorable economic and trade policies to accord its own interests, but China going on to say that India must abandon geopolitical calculation, such as considering joining the US's reckless and selfish game to contain China. This has come at a time when we just saw the US Secretary of State made an official visit to China to try and soothe the tempers that have been flying between the two countries. Remember, the entire surveillance saga had ensured that there were wrinkles, many deep divides that were in the relationships between the United States and China. That is something Antony Blinken tried to smoothen out, but looks like Beijing continues to provoke as far as India and US relations go. Siddhant, my colleague, joining us, getting us more details as far as the response from China is concerned. Siddhant, the response from China is on expected lines. We were expecting the kind of jitters that we are now seeing from the Chinese state media.
Well, absolutely, and you know, this particular reaction, or perhaps China taking position on this particular state visit of Prime Minister Modi to US is uncalled for, and the kind of comparison that Chinese media is drawing right now clearly establishes one thing, that China could see that there is India which can challenge China perhaps in years to come, or perhaps is challenging China right now with regards to dominance in Indo-Pacific, also with regards to investments and also in various other sectors. And this is the reason that Chinese media is saying that no matter whatever America does, or how much India and US will try to strengthen their ties, China is irreplaceable. China cannot be replaced when it comes to supply chain, and you know, not just America, but in fact India and other countries rely heavily on China. So this is a position which Chinese state media has taken. Now they have also given some examples saying that that Apple, which has one of the largest markets in India, you know, relies on Chinese supply chain. They also they have also said, and Chinese media has reported, that India has increased its export to America, but simultaneously India has also increased its imports from China. So, China mainly wants to give this message out that no matter how much India and America will come closer to each other, China cannot be replaced. China wants to replace America as a global superpower. B, China also wants to retain the chair of Asian superpower. And if any country which can challenge China or perhaps can take on China militarily. Now, in the world, everyone talks about China. Every country talks about China. But none of these countries have ever taken on China militarily. It is only India which has taken on China militarily. So China understands the growing significance, the growing strategic importance of India, and also the kind of defense agreements that India is going to sign with US is something which China is worried about. Now, India has also asked US to open a repair mechanism in India, which will not only serve for the maintenance of the defense equipments of India, but whole of the region. India has also asked America to remove some of the sanctions in terms of defense exports to India, so that not just India but whole of the region gets benefited by procuring American technology.
Yes.
And as far as defense technology is concerned, India is in talks to acquire Predator drones. India is also in talks to acquire armored vehicles. India is perhaps going to sign under defense industrial cooperation. India is also going to get jet engine deals signed. So very soon India is going to make its own jet engine with the help of the American technology in India. And all these things, all these developments are a matter of great concern for China. And this is perhaps
Absolutely,
the
and the
reason
next 72
that
hours
Chinese
are only going to
concerned.
make Beijing even more jittery. We'll have to wait and watch as to what kind of reactions come to the fore. But for the moment, Siddhant, thank you so much. Shifting focus now, search for a missing submersible with 5 people on board is underway as they went missing while making a tour of the Titanic's wreckage. Among the 5, one of them has been reported to be British billionaire Hamish Harding. The search crew on board a Boeing P-8 aircraft dropped sonar buoys to be able to locate the vessel that went missing on Sunday. They have now been reaching out to commercial vessels as well to seek help in the search operations. Take a look at how it's all going.
A search is still underway for a missing submersible with 5 people on board that was touring the wreckage of the Titanic. British billionaire Hamish Harding is among the missing, according to social media posts. US and Canadian ships and planes continued to circle around the site near Newfoundland on Monday. Crews on board a Boeing P-8 aircraft, originally for anti-submarine warfare, dropped sonar buoys to locate the vessel, which lost contact with ships above on Sunday. US Coast Guard Rear Admiral John Major said they've also been reaching out to commercial vessels for help.
The location of the search is approximately 900 miles east of Cape Cod, in a water depth of roughly 13,000 feet. It is a remote area, and it is a challenge to conduct a search in that remote area, but we are deploying all available assets to make sure that we can locate the craft and rescue the people on board.
The submarine operator Ocean Gate Expeditions said it lost contact with the vessel itself called the Titan 1 hour and 45 minutes after it began diving towards the Titanic. Authorities say it's still unclear if the sub has surfaced or if it's still underwater, but they said it could stay submerged for 96 hours. Titanic historian Larry Daly said on Monday he was hopeful the missing sub could be found.
Deep submersible diving is very dangerous, but it's high tech, and as each year goes by, the equipment gets better, the technology gets better, and so on. So I'm very hopeful and very positive. I was in the sub for 12 hours. We have our own breathing system on board, and if that's maintained properly, like changing your filter and your CO2 scrubber, you can stay down there for quite a few hours.
The British billionaire Harding was identified as being on board by what appeared to be a social media post from his stepson. Harding himself had also posted on Facebook that he would be aboard the sub, and there have been no further posts from him since. The expeditions to see the British passenger liner that famously sank in 1912 after it struck an iceberg cost $250,000 per person. The trips set out from St. John's, Newfoundland, before heading out roughly 400 miles into the Atlantic to the wreckage site.
Now, the latest Mission Impossible movie, Dead Reckoning Part 1, had its world premiere in Rome on Monday, with stars meeting fans at the Spanish Steps by Piazza Spagna. Why Rome? That's because a scene involving a wide car chase in the movie was filmed at the Spanish Steps. The rather thrilling chase features Haley Atwell and Tom Cruise handcuffed together while driving a vintage Fiat 500. From what we know so far about the movie, Ethan Hunt will be seen reuniting with his fellow agents, being played by Simon Pegg and Rebecca Ferguson. Their mission this time surrounds destroying an international terror cell to avert a nuclear catastrophe. All eyes are set on Cruise's special stunts, a signature mark of his in all of his action films. The power-packed film is set to release in the United States on the 12th of July.
This movie, it is an epic adventure. It's bigger than all the films. It has vivid characterizations. It has glorious, luxurious locations. And practical action. And the stuff that we've accomplished with that, the whole crew, has never been seen before on screen. We even built our own train to destroy it.
I knew what I put into it and how hard we all worked. And so watching the movie, of course, so much of it doesn't end up in the final edit. I'm just incredibly proud of the work ethic that we've all had to make this movie.
It feels like we've been baking it for a long, long time, and it's really nice to finally be able to have it in theaters. I mean, we're all about the audience, so I've just been dying for an audience to see it.
Part of that whole sequence with the women is about getting to Ethan and attacking what he loves most, in a sense. Taking advantage of that opportunity to hurt him and to get under his skin.
I mean, this is Mission. When it comes to Mission, you live it. You train. When I'm not on Mission, I literally just call Tom saying, can you sort of send me programs of training? Because I don't know how to activate myself.
We practice so many different things to make sure to find the fight style of the character. So at some point I did some sword training, kicking, punching, fighting with a big stick, and of course running, sprinting, doing some Pilates to make sure that your core is strong, that your ankles are strong, because you want to make sure that you stay strong throughout the movie.
Well, when McHugh suggested it to me back in 2019, I thought it was a great idea. It felt very science fiction. It felt very kind of Mission Impossible technology, you know, and here we are 3 years later, and it feels like this is the most topical film out at the moment, you know. It's an interesting proposition, the whole idea of AI. We've always been frightened of things that we fear might replace us or destroy us, you know, monsters, gods, aliens, whatever. AI is something that is actually far more likely than any of those things, you know, and so I think it's on everyone's mind.
There's one last mission for Jack Ryan. Yes, John Krasinski is back, and as Jack Ryan as Tom Clancy is all ready to release on the July 30th. This is the 4th season, I beg your pardon, that is going to come out. But as the saying goes, all good things do have to come to an end. So does Krasinski's journey with the Jack Ryan franchise. In a recent interview, the actor expressed his gratitude for being able to work with the team. He mentioned that there have been key takeaways and life experiences that he went through during the filming of this saga. Among them, travel has been a big part of it, as the shoot was done at several locations, from Morocco to Greece to Hungary to Austria, the Czech Republic and Slovakia as well. The season also sees the comeback of Abby Cornish playing the romantic interest that she had in season 1. It's time for a rather emotional release of this particular season, as fans get up to watch John Krasinski for one last time playing the legend Jack Ryan.
Clearly, we traveled a lot for this show, and I got to say, it was one of those things. I hadn't traveled that much from a logistical standpoint, but also from an emotional and, I don't know, a human standpoint. It was amazing to not only travel to these places, but immerse yourself in different parts of the world and really get to experience how other people live and how other cultures have survived. And it's just so amazing. I think we all got this sense that we were a part of something much, much bigger, which sounds pretty naive and ignorant, but it's true that, you know, when you do travel, you realize that it's just so exciting to be a part of a show that is a global show and actually get to go out and experience the globe. One thing that I really appreciated about the writing, and the writers did this, was it wasn't about one-upping the season before. It was about changing the dynamic and experiencing it in a different way. And so bringing him back into DC, you are forced to experience Jack in a whole new set of circumstances. Not only that he's back home, but who he's back home with. That didn't spoil anything, right? No, good. And his rowing team, I meant his crew team. No, but also, you know, it really unearthed, in my opinion, my favorite storyline of the season is that the enemy is no longer on the outside, it's on the inside this season for Jack. And I think that this Boy Scout that we met in, you know, thanks to his character called him a Boy Scout, this Boy Scout you met in season 1 has gone through all these iterations and evolutions of the gray area that most people live in. And all of a sudden in the 4th season, he realizes it's living in his backyard, and he feels a betrayal that he not only has to come up with a plan to save the world again, but also come up with a plan to rescue this ideal that he's been living by, and a version of what he thought he was fighting for and who he was fighting with. He has to reconcile that for himself. So that was really the fun part about going back to DC and having that whole storyline.
That's all we could pack in for you in this edition of News 18 Global. Thank you so much for tuning in.